What's obvious to you is not always obvious to other people listening to you. And the one way to unlock that for yourself is by developing this one particular skill and getting really good at it, even though you may feel incredibly uncomfortable at times. And this is still a work in progress for me. And I continue to encourage people that I coach or that I work with to develop this skill, to get good at talking in one shot without a teleprompter or using any sort of device, but really just knowing your information, understanding its sections, and then being able to convey that message back to an audience. The skill is articulation. And a lot of times we get the articulation conversation confused. We conflate articulation with only being how you sound in front of others. And while your ability to sound polished is important, your ability to speak in that sort of cadence and that rhythm and sounding like you are punching or stamping words out or pausing appropriately matters, of course. But it's not the only skill when it comes to articulation. When we are thinking about articulation, we're trying to make what's obvious to us, some skills, some knowledge, some ability to understand things a little bit differently. We're trying to get that out of our head and move it to a place where it could be used by others. We're trying to help an audience understand that. And a lot of times teachers do this incredibly well. And you have constant everyday reps at this, especially if you are a K-12 teacher. If you're a K-5 teacher, in a lot of cases, you have multiple reps across multiple disciplines in a day. If you're a sort of 7-12 teacher, you may have ability to have different sections or different courses that you teach. If you're a facilitator like me and a coach like me, you have an audience at times where you can practice these things and continue to get better at the skill of articulation. But it doesn't just show up in those moments. It shows up in a lot of different moments. And I'm going to give you some ways that I think could be really helpful for developing your skill of articulation. And again, I just want to ground that in a few notes that I have, just so that we're on the same page when it comes to articulation. Again, you probably know your craft really well, and you're relying on your instincts or the knowledge base that you have that maybe has gone underground. And your first job in articulation and being able to articulate what's obvious to you is being able to surface what's underground, being able to surface how you do things. So getting clear on what it is you do, like facilitation. Let's take that for an example. Well, when I'm facilitating something, I'm relying on models and questioning as a way to get the group to interact with particular content, right? So the reason I can convey that here and articulate that idea is that I have very clearly worked on that myself. What are the skills or the moves that I make in my craft that can really help people understand that particular section of my work? So for you, the first one is to kind of uncover the areas of your work or your craft that maybe others would just need to kind of think back on, like, how did you first get started with that, right? Or where are you now in that, and what's the gap? So once you have that information and you can kind of clearly articulate, like, these are the facilitation moves that I make, this is how they've developed over time, or whatever, or teaching moves, or whatever you're working on in your craft, that is the first sort of step. The next one is to get clear on mental models and using frameworks as a way to convey what's in your head and how you do something or what it is you do, and being able to use that information. So I have a few mental models that I've developed my own self. The way that I explain coaching in a very simplified version of coaching is my job as a coach. And this is like, think about this in parts. This is like a framework that I'm using to kind of illustrate a sticky idea, a point about how does coaching impact the coachee or the person next to you or beside you. It's first finding out where they want to be. So what's the destination? Where do they want to be? What's the goal they have for themselves? The second part is identifying where are they now in relation to that destination. So if somebody comes to me and they say, hey, I want to run a marathon this year. I'll say, great. How many miles are you running right now? Or what's your current state of fitness? Once I had those two things figured out, now I know what gap we have to close. And this third part of this is understanding that my job as a coach is to help my partner or my coachee navigate the steps in between. So, how do we first identify the pathways in between where you want to be and where you are now? How do I help you find your first step on those pathways? And how do I support you in your journey to becoming more confident around those pathways? How do I help you find a sense of action, a sense of clarity, and a sense of energy around your work in between where you are now and where you want to be? So when I explain coaching that way, it really helps people visualize it because they can kind of see there's a point and a destination where somebody wants to be, and there's a spot at which they are now. In between there, they can kind of visualize those pathways, and they see my role as the coach to help them unlock those pathways with action, clarity, energy, and confidence. That's a mental model that I've developed over time. And what happens is when you sort of take your craft, you identify what it is you're doing in your craft, and you can make it clear for someone else by using frameworks or mental models or analogies or stories. Those things unlock a level of your articulation that makes it easier for someone to understand what it is you're putting out there. And then, two, be able to operationalize it for their own work or their own craft. The next few ideas that I have here, especially with articulation, is to get out there and clearly identify what people that you admire are doing when it comes to articulation. You may be interested in how certain people on YouTube or other platforms convey their ideas. Your job is to become curious about how they do that. What is it that they're doing in front of the camera, so that you can kind of unpack those skills? For me, it's using things like mental models to describe aspects of my work. When I have those things stepped out, people gravitate towards those ideas. If that helps you, then continue to study people who use mental models or frameworks to articulate their work. If you like the cadence and the rhythm and the vocabulary of a presenter or a speaker, then continue to study them. And as you study them, make sure you pay careful attention to what they're doing in their articulation. What are they doing with articulation that makes it different than how it feels for you? The next one is to look at all of this articulation with sort of a 70% mindset of reps. I like to get an idea to like 70%, right? Even this video, there is no script. I'm just relying on an article that I wrote, some ideas in there. I have that on the screen in front of me. I am relying on it being at about 70%. And I know that I will continue to close the gap on how this information sounds around the skill of articulation the more I continue to speak about it. And I've done it a few times in short form video. I've written an article about it on my Substack, but now I'm in front of the camera and there is no real pathway here. I'm just sort of riffing, right? And as I continue to riff about this idea, not only do I deepen my understanding about it, I still remain curious about it, but I know that with time, 70% turns into 75%, gets a little bit better, turns into 80%, turns into 90%. And all of a sudden, I have a sort of quantifiable expertise in an area, or at least a comfort and a confident level of expertise that I can continue to talk about it in ways that it shows up for me. So get it to about 70%. Get it into some areas that you feel comfortable first. So this could be around friends. It could be around a few meetings that you have with sort of your team or whatever you're working on. Continue to try it out, right? So you're just trying it out step by step, knowing that each time you step into that conversation or that idea, that it will strengthen because you're working on articulating that idea. So 70% in low stakes reps, low stakes environments. Then you want to raise the stakes. You want to have an audience or a platform where you can come on to a place like, I don't know, short form video, or maybe you're going to come on here and you're going to try something. that's going to raise the stakes just enough for you to have a little bit more confidence around the topic, be able to articulate it clearly, and be able to get through an entire session where it's not just your friends and family anymore. You're kind of stepping out and you're putting this out there and learning in public. So that's sort of the next point. And then just understanding that this is all just one big continuous loop of improvement. If you really want to get good at articulation, you will continue to lean into what it means to be articulate. You'll identify the role models that you have, the speakers that you engage with, and you'll say, what is it that they do that will help me become more articulate? And then you'll try it in low stakes environments, these 70% kind of formats, if you will. You try it in front of family, you try it in front of friends, and you continue to push your ideas out, because the whole point of articulation is to make your ideas portable. You want to take what's in your head, what's obvious to you, and get it out of your head so that others can operationalize it for themselves. You want to make your knowledge transferable to another person. That's the whole point of articulation. So that's the end of the message here. If you want to hear more from me or check into my Substack, feel free to do that. Brian Seppi, Best to Better is that platform. You can check me out on all the other social medias at Brian_Seppi_. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for all you do, and we'll see you in the next one.